Welcome to my first review of the Nikon Zr. This is an exciting moment for me. Yes, the first review because I'm going to really dig deep into this camera and probably unpeel the layers of this camera. I'm going to focus on 5 big beautiful things that I've discovered about this camera. For me, the output, what comes out of the camera at the end of the day is the most important thing. For a lot of people, it is the experience. It's how the camera handles, how the camera is designed, the layout, stuff like that. So, welcome to Frames team. Let's get into understanding the Nikon Zr in a bit more depth. So when I look at this camera as a cinema camera or a flavor of cinema-ness added to this camera, the first thing that I expect from this package therefore is the difference in the image quality. And if I cannot see the difference, then I suddenly start to feel, well, what's the difference? So the first thing is image quality. Well, this is a Nikon Red branded camera. It says Nikon Red back of the camera and there is Z Cinema here. I did feel that the output of this camera is significantly different enough that I put this camera separately from my rest of Nikon cameras, my Sony, my Fuji, and that other mystery camera brand that I'm soon going to get into and I've used for some time. The image quality improvement that I was talking about is primarily about the kind of grain you have, the dynamic range, just the nature of the output, the colors, right? I'm going to zoom in on the colors more. Of course, I can tell you the grain quality, the grain amount of grain, shadow performance, all of those things are better, significantly different. It's the color that really shook me. Okay, I think I never had. So I'm going to talk about color, and there's something related to color that I'm going to talk about very soon. The first thing that I felt about the color of this camera is that it's rich. It's really rich. Like, I don't have to do a lot of work to get the richness of this camera. The colors feel deep and really saturated without pushing the saturation. Okay, that's the difference. The colors also feel thick. For the first time I realized what it means to actually use a 12-bit file. I have used, sparingly, I have used the Z6III and Z8 NRAW 12-bit files. They're very rich, large files, equally large files here, but I felt that on the Red RAW, with the Red RAW, the color richness is better. It's just deeper, more pleasant colors. And the difference is not what you see on the back of the screen. Of course, the screen is fantastic. We're going to talk about that. But the major difference is when I start editing. When I start editing, I see that the shadows that look crushed, but I'm kind of retrieving information from shadows, I still feel that there's a lot of color depth. There is grain, maybe yes, but there's a lot of color depth. In the highlights, it's the same thing. There is so much richness to the color that I see coming from this camera. It's fantastic. And of course, the Red RAW color is actually different from the Nikon colors, and I don't think they're actually the same thing there. I think they're quite different, honestly. I like both in different situations. I realize that like skin tone on the red raw better, and I realized that I like inanimate objects at times more from the Nikon N raw. But if I have to choose one as my for my default setting on the ZR, I'm going to keep it on 6K30 red raw 12-bit. Okay, I'm not going to change from there at all. And I think after seeing what these colors look like, after seeing the shadow performance, the highlight performance, the nature of the grain, it's just unbeatable. It's crazy. I love the way it looks. Also, couple of other things is that it plays very nicely on my M3 Max 14-inch MacBook. M3 Max, I think that's what it is. It plays beautifully on my timeline on the DaVinci Resolve, even when I add some noise reduction. Now, if I add both temporal and spatial noise reduction, it's a bit stuttery. It's a bit kind of, but if I go for one, for example, for this series of cameras for this partially stacked sensor, I'm going to go for temporal noise reduction. And when I use temporal noise reduction, I see that the playback is smooth. There is no drop in frames. That's what my experience has been. So I am feeling very comfortable actually adding grain and then doing edits. Of course, I can always use half the resolution on the timeline when I'm, working the timeline. So the experience of editing the files, the experience of the speed, the ease with which the computer actually handles the red raw file is fantastic. And of course, I've spoken about color. The second big point on the Nikon Zr is actually autofocus. Now, I've always loved the autofocus performance on the Xpeed 7 Nikon bodies, whether it is a Z9, Z8, they're fantastic. And then moving forward, when I got the Z6III, it was really good. And for photos, a lot of people think the Z9, Z8 and Z9 are the benchmark. Yes. But for video, I have always felt as if the Z6III felt more intuitive. The focus transition have always been slightly more softer. I've liked the Z6III quite a bit when it came to autofocus. But the significant thing that kind of bothered me when it comes to autofocus is that when I used touch tracking, it tracks beautifully. But when it's shifting from point A to point B, there is at least one pulse. There's at least one pulse, like back and forth one time, and then it settles on the right point of focus. That's what I found on even the expensive lenses using the Z6III or the Z8 or any other Nikon camera so far. That's not happening with the ZR anymore. And to my pleasant surprise, it's moving nicely, smoothly, and then settling very surely on that next focus point. It's not feeling jittery, too jumpy, too unsure. That characteristic someone Nikon has figured it out, and it's just perfect right now. So it's fast, and at the same time it's sure. Is that it is surety? It's just that it was that fidgetiness of the autofocus, too undecided aggressiveness of the autofocus that I kind of did not like about the Nikon autofocus at times. That was my only gripe when it came to autofocus. And the Nikon Zr does not have that. They have solved that problem. So this is now an extremely usable camera. And like I said, I use the touch tracking from the back of the camera, right? So when I did that, what I realized is that first of all, it's a large screen. And this is the third point. Everyone talks about the screen being so large and fantastic, so bright and all that. But I think the beauty of the screen is, yes, of course, maybe when you have a screen like this, DCI P3 4-inch big bright 1000 nits screen, you may not have to use an external monitor in some situations, but in some other situations you may still have to use one. But I think the real masterstroke about this particular screen is how beautiful, how touch friendly this skin is. This screen is not skin, screen. This screen is very, very touch friendly. It feels nice and soft. I don't know. It is a feeling. And when I touch it, it feels like a premium smartphone screen. The screen overall is so nice to use that I did not feel the lack of buttons on this camera, because this camera does not have a lot of buttons. And since it does not have a lot of buttons, the screen, by virtue of this being so good, and they've added this new menu system, right? They've added this new menu system where a bunch of stuff on top of it, like you can switch on the view assist from here. So much is happening on the screen. Then, of course, I have the I button, of course, these three dots here, which takes me to this particular menu. In other cameras, you have an I button there. It does the same job. Now I have another 1, 2, 3, 5. There are 12 things that are put in this I menu, right? 12 things. So the screen is so easy to use, and there's so much information and controls available on the screen that I think going forward, Nikon can actually think of pushing a firmware update to make this screen accessibility from the screen even better. What I mean by that is they can put more buttons on the screen if they want to. That's how good this camera is. Okay. Now, third point, I think this is the fourth point. The fourth point that I want to talk to you about is actually the ergonomics. And so a lot of people might think this camera does not have a lot of buttons. So I have, what you have here is the on and off button. It's not a switch, it's a button. But this button lights up, right? There's a light to the button. All right. And then there are three buttons here. These three buttons, the first one is a display button, then you have a mode button, and then you have a exposure compensation button. And on top, you have a photo to video switch here. What I discovered about this camera, the genius of this design is that you have a mode button on this camera, all right? So the mode button, I have access to 5 user modes, U1, 2, 3, and 4. And the beautiful thing about that is that I press the mode button and I go directly, I can choose different modes from here. Now I can set it to, let's say 6K 60 NRAW, and the Red RAW, that's my mode 1, let's say. I can just quickly shift between these 4 modes just by pressing 2 buttons, one on the body of the camera and one on the screen. What this allows me to do essentially, I don't have to change settings quickly, okay? And there is, I'm not going to change the display button. That's going to remain, I'm not going to customize and change that. I probably customize and change the exposure compensation button here on top to white balance or something like that, depending, or maybe ISO, I'll figure that out, something like that. So I still think at the end of the day, this is a very customizable camera, very user-friendly camera. It's just that a lot of the physical buttons have been replaced by equally usable digital buttons, which is what this is something that no one has spoken about. I discovered this about the camera, and this was a pleasant surprise for me. A very good choice by Nikon. The big point about this camera is customizability, flexibility. Look, this is an affordable camera. A lot of entry-level cameras begin at this price point, or they're more expensive than this. At $2,200 US, this is accessible to a lot of entry to mid-level guys doing content or even personal stuff. So if I don't want a lot of expensive pro stuff on this body to rig it out, I can just keep this camera bare minimum, nothing on it. Maybe a wide angle lens, maybe a wide angle zoom lens, third party, someone. And then just use this camera for my travel, personal work, stuff like that. It's just very easy to use because it's light and there are light lenses available, very good autofocus, and you have got the H.265 10-bit 420 file. Nikon is probably push a firmware update to give the Nikon Zr external SSD recording. So if that happens, maybe you rig it out with an SSD as well. So you can really build this out to make it a very heavy, professionally capable setup. And this camera is more than good enough given the image quality that you get out of this camera. This does not heat up. So, you know, you can do whatever you want. It's extremely like no fan but fantastic cooling. You want this camera to be heavy and completely be rigged out like a pros use case scenario. Well, you can do that as well. And my guess is, the rumor is that we're going to see a lot of modification options being designed for the Nikon ZR. For example, in India during the launch period, you can actually ask Nikon to give you a package, a bundled package where you have the small rig cage bundled with the camera body. So you already have that, right? The camera is barely out and you already have stuff like this ready from small rig. So I'm pretty sure in the next 3 to 4 months, you're going to see the market getting flooded by a lot of third-party brands, making cards large enough to be used with this camera, making, audio systems, lighting systems to go with this camera, gimbal even. I don't know. I'm thinking some brand may just figure out a very ergonomically easy, user-friendly vlogging setup for this camera. So lenses suited for this, stuff like that. So I think there's a lot of ecosystem building that's going to happen for the Nikon ZR, because this has got a tremendously positive response. And I know so many people actually dropping their Sony's FX3 and 30s and going for the Nikon ZR. I know this because I know that it's getting a lot of pre-orders right now. So given that, I feel more confident that the ecosystem is going to grow. So I don't think that the current form factor is actually a problem. I think the current form factor is a strength because it gives you flexibility. And that's something that no one is talking about again. So subscribe to the channel. Let me know what you think of this review. Of course, I'm going to have my own copy of a Nikon ZR in the next 2 weeks or so, and I'm excited about it, looking forward to it. I have used this version, which is going to go back, but I've been using this for the last 1 week, and every time I have honestly enjoyed more editing the files of this camera, the Nikon, the Red RAW codec, than even shooting with this camera. This is not to say the shooting with this camera is not enjoyable. Thoroughly is, but it's just that the editing experience is so good when you see the output and your eyes go, wow, that feels so great that you want that from a camera. This is setting a new standard, at least for me. I am not a cinema camera user. This is my first quote unquote cinema camera. So yeah, can you guess what system I'm actually getting rid of and what system I might consider getting into? Tell me whether you can guess it. Subscribe to the channel, so look forward to more interesting videos on the ZR and more things. See you.